Okay, we are live on YouTube now, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to Rushcliffe Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting. May I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities, Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. And may I remind councillors and other speakers to please switch your microphones on and off as appropriate. So switch them on when you're speaking, but also to remember to switch them off when you're not speaking. Thank you very much. So I'm Councillor Richard Butler. I'm the chairman of the Planning Committee. And with me today is councillors Mrs. Stockwood, who is my vice chairman, and councillors Bailey, Clark, Healy, Mason, Purdue-Horan, and Councillor Thomas. And officers with us this afternoon are Mr. Ashcroft, who is Planning Services Consultant, Mr. Cook, Principal Planning Officer, and Mr. Pettit, who is our Landscape Officer, Mrs. Sells, who is the Borough Solicitor, and Mrs. Coop, who is one of our Democratic Services officers. So welcome, everybody. As we have quite a few visitors with us today, I better just mention a health and safety matter. We're not expecting any fire alarms or practices or whatever. So if the alarm goes off, I think we must assume it's for real, and you will need to exit the building through the doors to the side or the rear as appropriate, but be assured, follow us and we'll get out as appropriate. So hopefully there will be no incidents like that to worry about. So with that in mind, we'll go into the first item on the agenda, please, which are the apologies for absence and any substitute members, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Walker, Councillor Bansal and Councillor Price. Unfortunately, there are no substitutes today. Thank you.
Thank you. So we note those apologies. Item 2 is declarations of interest, which are split into either under the Code of Conduct and or under the Planning Code. There will be a few declarations of interest from members today. I have to declare a non-pecuniary interest in item number 22/22/00243/FUL. This is land north of Copgrave Road, Althorpe, and this is due to my having predetermined my position, which is noted in the report. For that item, I have to stand down from the chair here and hand over to my vice chair to chair the meeting. And also, from my point of view, at the Rushcliffe Oaks application 22/01639/FUL, I have to declare a non-pecuniary interest in that because I am one of the local ward members. Do we have any other declarations? Oh my goodness, lots of hands going up. So first of all, Councillor Thomas and Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare an interest in the item on the crematorium because I am a member of the council's working party on the crematorium, but I don't think that precludes me from taking part in the debate and decision. Thank you.
I shouldn't think it does, but can we just get confirmation from that, please?
If you're able to approach the application with an open mind and consider you can it fairly, then it's a matter for yourself, Councillor Thomas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then there's Councillor Clark and then Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chairman. Declare an interest on the first item, Lamcote Gardens, Ratcliffe-on-Trent. I'm one of the ward members. So I should be vacating my seat for that item.
Understood, thank you. And Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I declare an interest in the crematorium site. I'm a member of the working group, and clearly it's within the ward of Cotgrave as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there will be a little bit of chair moving going on, so as the afternoon goes on. So thank you for that. Next item on the agenda are the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 8th of September. For those of us who are here, are we happy that they're correct? Yes, thank you. So I will sign those I'll probably sign them later, actually, so because we've got a busy afternoon, so I'll leave them there for now and I'll sign them a little bit later on. So we've done the minutes. So, right, we now move into the substantial items of the afternoon, which are planning applications. Before we do move into all of the applications, there have been quite a lot of late representations sent on both on email and also hard printed copies. Can I confirm, members, that we have received and seen those late representations? Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. So with that, I have to hand over to my vice chairman now, Councillor Stopwood. So thank you. I'll. Oh, sorry. I beg your pardon. Sorry. Yes, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'm so sorry. Yes. Well done for spotting that deliberate mistake. Yes. Yeah. I'm getting my papers in the wrong order here, so I'm sorry about that. Yes, you've stuck with me for this one. So the first application is 8 Lambcote Gardens, Radcliffe-on-Trent. This is a tree preservation order, and this is going to be talked through for us by Mr. Pettit. And apologies for my mistake there. Thank you.
Thank you. We've protected a silver birch tree in the grounds of 8 Lambcote Gardens, Radcliffe-on-Trent, a residential cul-de-sac of 17 properties. The tree is located in the garden to the side of the property. The tree preservation order was made on the 14th of July this year. The council needs to confirm the order within 6 months of it being made. And we've got a duty to consider all objections raised, and the owner of the property has objected. At the time of making the tree preservation order, we were considering an application to construct a dwelling in the gardens to the side of the property. And a member of the public called us and said, look, I really think these trees are important. Can you consider protecting them? And, you know, I visited the site and there was 2 trees, a silver birch, which you can see on the left, and this oak tree, which you can see on the right, both probably 20 to 25 years old. And whilst I was considering which ones to protect, the oak tree was felled, and the resident called back and said, you know, these trees really are important and they're being removed. And at that point, we decided to protect the remaining tree, which is this silver birch tree, which you can see on the right-hand side of the road. Lambcote Gardens doesn't have a huge amount of tree cover. There's some at the back of the site, and we felt because it was visible to the public, it justified protection. The owner has objected and have made the following sort of concerns. The first point is about the fact that a neighbour called us about the tree. Residents are allowed to contact us and suggest if trees should be protected, and we assess them in the way that we do any other tree we're interested in protecting. We've got a points-based assessment, and that takes into account, you know, the aesthetic value of the tree, the impact if it's removed, its ability to grow to full maturity. After we protected the tree and after we refused the application, they paid someone to carry out a tree survey, and they've categorised it as a British Standard Category B tree, which is of moderate quality. Under the British standards, 4 categories: A for high quality, B for moderate, C for low, and U, which means a tree that's ready to come out. It's dead or dying. And it's entirely appropriate for us to protect a moderate quality tree. In fact, we've protected A, B and C trees in the past. Government advice is that tree preservation orders should be used to protect trees. If their removal would have a significant negative impact on the local environment and its enjoyment by the public, and trees should be at least visible from a public vantage point. As you can see, the tree is quite prominent in the street scene. And we feel it really does have enough amenity value, public amenity value, to justify protection. The resident was also concerned about its height, its multi-stem structure, and the close proximity of the tree to the road, the telegraph pole, and the house, and whether, if it failed, it would cause damage. As I said, it's 20 years old, so it's in the prime of its life. And I don't think it's got any risk of failure for decades to come. And obviously, as it matures, even if it remains protected, people can apply to prune it or do work to the tree. And we feel it would be appropriate for a tree owner to manage and monitor the health of their trees as it matures. And as you can see from this photo, it's well clear of the phone line, whereas the oak that was removed was growing in quite close proximity to the telegraph pole. They also worry that it creates shadows in the garden. It will do, but I think as the sun moves around, the pattern of shadow and sunlight will move as well, and the garden is generally going to benefit from both sunlight and shade throughout the day, and it doesn't seem unreasonable to me. And then the owner sort of said they would have accepted a planning condition requiring a replacement tree, but we could only consider, you know, the application as it stood, and that showed both trees to be removed. And the recommendation is that the tree preservation order should be confirmed without modification.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no guest or public speakers on this item, so we can go straight into a discussion and a decision. So does anyone have any comments or questions to make on this? Or yes, Councillor Thomas, please.
I'd like to move the recommendation, please. I think, you know, if the tree needs any work or it needs to be felled, that can be done with an application. It's just a question of going through an extra, you know, hoop to get that done. And I think in the interest of the public community, it's worth preserving the tree. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have a seconder at this stage? First hand I saw was Councillor Purdue-Horan. You're seconding as per the report. Thank you. You had your hand up. Was that to second? Yeah. Do you want to say anything or no? Any other comments from anyone? I think no. So we've had the report read through and addressed to us. It's very clear. I think it's clear what we've got to decide. So I don't think there's any other comments needed. So let's make a decision on this. Show of hands. Those in favour of the recommendation for bringing the tree preservation order in, please show. So I think that's unanimous. Yes, so there's no one against, no abstention. So that's decided. So now we start the the chair movement. So I'll now hand over to Councillor Mrs. Stockwood to chair the next item. So thank you.
Thank you. The next application is 22/00243/full, land north of Cockgrave Road, Althall, Cockgrave. It's for the erection of 4 upholstery sheds and associated infrastructure, 8 feed bins, 2 feed blending rooms, a gatehouse, generator, plant room, water tank, dirty water tank and gas tanks, the creation of a new access road, car parking and concrete apron, as well as no attenuation pond. And Mr. Cook will take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. And before I start, we've received another late rep from Mr. Tim Bowden, concerned that issues he raised earlier have not been properly addressed. First point he raised was the fact that Councillor Moore does not support the application, and as it was reported in the committee report, that he did support it. Members have been made aware of the fact in the late representations that Councillor Moore did change his view, and he's now taking a neutral stance on it. The second change that he has raised, again, is also in your late reps. Joe Churchill MP, who was the Secretary of State for Agricultural Innovation, did supply a letter to the local MP, which stated basically government guidance on how these matters should be dealt with. And wrongly, that was reported as being a comment from Joe Churchill MP. I'd just like to clarify, again, it is in your late reps that that is not the case, and she's not making any comments on the application directly. The third point raised was relating to the application to the Environment Agency for an environment permit, which included both a borehole and an incinerator. They do not form part of this planning application, so they are not being considered. And the fourth issue was relating to the choice of site. Although advice was given earlier to the applicant that this may not be the best site, it is for him to decide where he makes the application, and it's not for the district council, and we have to consider the application as submitted. So although people think there may be better sites, we have to consider the application before us. And I'll go on to the presentation now. Okay, the application is for the erection of 4 poultry sheds and associated infrastructure, 8 feeding bins, 2 feed blending rooms, a gatehouse, a generator, a plant room, water tank, dirty water tank and gas tanks, and the creation of a new road access road, a concrete apron and an attenuation pond. The site is currently in arable use and is located within the Greenbelt, covering an area of approximately 4.5 hectares, lying some 1.2 kilometres from Cotgrave and about 500 metres from the village of Althorpe. The nearest dwelling to the site is Keeper's Cottage, which is approximately 319 metres southwest of the site, with Cropwell Wolds Farm and Prospect House some 630 metres to the north. The site is partly contained by established woodlands directly to the south and west, whilst further woodlands lie at a greater distance to the north and southeast. The land is flat for the site area, however, land slopes steeply down an escarpment further to the east. Long distance views of the site are available largely from the east and northwest. A public right-of-way runs to the south of the site and does cross the access road, the proposed access road. The proposal is for the erection of a poultry farm and associated infrastructure, and the details of which are set out in your reports at section 4. The total number of birds to be raised in the facility is 190,000, and any one cycle in terms of the production and growth of the birds lasts for a number of weeks, and there are approximately 7.5 cycles during a year. An environmental impact assessment has been provided and assessed by the appropriate consultees. In terms of comments received, Councillor Cumberland as Ward Councillor objects to the proposal, and the grounds for objection are set out in your reports, and additional comments provided in the late representations. In the main, these highlight the following points: impact on the environment, residential amenity, impact on health, noise, odour, dust, all of which can be carried on the wind, light pollution, the economic and environmental benefits are limited, and the landscape suggesting that it should be recited, so the landscaping issue, and it should be recited elsewhere. It is contrary to policy 1 of part 2 of the local plan. The adjacent ward councillor, Councillor Butler, also objects, and his comments are also in your report, but can be summarised as: the area is characterised by small farm holdings, where this is a large factory unit out of keeping with the area. The visual appearance of the proposal and impact on residents, light pollution and impact on the nearby observatory. This is a historic village with architectural finds nearby, and the development could put these at risk. The unique feel and tradition of the village and the ambience of the area will be lost. The report states that Councillor Moore supported the application, but having reviewed it and it not being in his ward, his observations have been amended to a neutral stance. As I previously explained, the letter from Joe Churchill was sent to the council and wrongly interpreted as a letter of support. That support has now been withdrawn. Ruth Edwards MP, the local MP, expressed significant concerns around the application about the impact on the observatory. If approved, she has declared that she will speak to the Secretary of State and get the application called in or consider taking it to judicial review. She's concerned about the impact on the ecology and that there is not enough biodiversity net gain proposed, the impact on the village, and the evidence fails to demonstrate adequate mitigation for noise, traffic movement, and impact on the footpath. She also comments that the development is not sustainable. The Council's Ecology and Sustainability Officer does not object to the proposal and recommends various conditions which have been applied and recommended were appropriate. The Nottinghamshire County Council Archaeologist Officer raises no objections, again subject to conditions. Neither does the Highway Authority or the lead local flood authority object to the proposal. The Notts County Council Rights of Way Officer does object to the proposals, and although the proposed landscaping scheme will help mitigate the impact of the on the Croppell Bishop footpath, there is no landscaping proposed to mitigate the impact on footpath 10. There is no recognition of how footpath 10 will be treated where it crosses the access road. The proposed hours will coincide when the footpath is most used, and the impact of traffic noise on the footpath is also a concern. Additional comments made by him on the amendments are concerns about the safety of the public, and how the footpath will be treated where it crosses the access road. Again, these details are being sought as part of the condition on the proposal. Other statutory comments are the Environment Agency, who raised no objection, Historic England, who raised no objection, Natural England, no objection, Highways England, no objection. Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, however, do object to the proposal on the grounds that not enough information has been submitted in respect of the impact on biodiversity and protected species. The studies undertaken fail to recognise the habitat potential of the woodland. It is essential to undertake measures to mitigate any impact on the woodland. Tree protection measures should also be put in place, and any planting should be of a native species. The Ramblers Association raised concerns about the impact of noise, air pollution, and the new excess, and comment that a diversion order may be required. There have been over 400 neighbour representations objecting to the proposal, and the main issues are listed in your reports, with the key areas of concern being the principal, impact on the landscape, lighting, environmental health, highways, ecology, flooding, and general points, including the impact on the observatory. There has been one letter of support. The relevant national and local bodies which need to be considered are set out in your reports. Looking at the principle of the development is supported by the NPPF in that it is clear that all types of sustainable business should be supported, including well-designed buildings, and officers are satisfied that the application proposed sustainable growth by the way of the development, well-designed new buildings suited within their location within the countryside and greenbelt. Although not supported by members and the public, this intensive form of agricultural enterprise is not uncommon in the countryside and comes under a licensing regime controlled by the Environment Agency. The site is in greenbelt, but agricultural buildings are not inappropriate in the greenbelt, and therefore special circumstances which need to be applied normally to demonstrate the need are not relevant in this case. This type of modern farming is not uncommon in the countryside, and with appropriate mitigation measures, it is considered the principle of development is acceptable. With regard to impact on the landscape, the site is set in an arable field in an elevated position and screened to a degree by existing woodlands, and set in an agricultural setting, and it is not out of character within this setting. With an appropriate landscaping scheme designed to help screen the development further, it can be assimilated into the landscape, reducing its impact. The landscape visual impact assessment has been undertaken. It is considered that with inclusion of a landscape condition, any areas of concern can be mitigated against. The design of the development and access arrangements are functional to meet the requirements of the proposed use. while using the structure and materials common within the countryside and on such developments. These are considered appropriate in this case. Accompanied by a transport assessment, considered by the Highway Authority, it concludes that the impact of the development is not considered to be severe. Furthermore, no objections were raised by the Highway Authority, and it considered that the proposed development would not have an adverse impact on highway safety to the extent that it should be refused. The applicant has agreed to a condition requiring a traffic management scheme, which will include signage and restrictions to avoid traffic entering the village. The Rights of Way officer has raised concerns about the impact on the footpath, both views from it and that no provision has been made for where the access road crosses the footpath, and that the official designated route no longer exists, and a desire line around the field boundary has formed. Again, one of the aims of the required landscaping scheme will be to screen the site, and a condition required full details of how the footpath crossing the site is sought, requesting details of surfacing, ongoing maintenance, where it crosses the access road, The applicant has also offered to reinstate the original line of the footpath. Policy 10 of the Local Plan Part 1 and echoed by Policy 1 of the Local Plan Part 2, it requires that consideration of the proposal be given to residential amenity. This has been considered in the main by the consultees looking at their areas of speciality. There have been no objections to the proposal or to the methodology by these consultees, and their comments indicate there are no reasons for concern when it comes to the impact on residential amenity. The site is controllable by the Environment Agency, and an environmental permit will be required. This will cover issues such as ammonia odour emissions and waste disposal, and any breach of the permit will be enforced by that agency. Where it is estimated that noise impact on residential amenity beyond acceptable levels, that will be enforced by the Council's Environmental Health Service. The development has a designed drainage system, and it is not a flood risk area, so no objections have been received from the lead local flood authority. Subject to conditions, there are no objections from the county archaeologist. Core Strategy Policy NE1 and Policy 38 of the LPP2 requires development to contribute towards conservation, enhancement and restoration of biodiversity and ecological networks throughout the landscape. The NPPF Section 15 advises that the planning system should conserve and enhance the natural and local environment by minimising impact on biodiversity and providing net gain in biodiversity where possible, contributing to the government's commitment to halt the overall decline in biodiversity, including by establishing coherent ecological networks that are more resilient to current and future pressures. Policy 17, Biodiversity of the Local Plan Part 1 Core Strategy, sets out the biodiversity of Rushcliffe, which will increase over the planned period by seeking to ensure that new developments provide new biodiversity features and improve existing biodiversity features wherever appropriate. The primary ecological appraisal, which has been submitted in support of the application, and the ecological and sustainable officer makes no objection. No priority habitats were identified on site, and the construction proposed to take place over the land primarily identified as arable land. Therefore, impacts are not predicted, as the site's habitat which will be affected by works are common and widespread and are considered to be of low intrinsic biodiversity value. The site is not of sufficient ecological value to warrant wholesale protection from the development. The development provides an opportunity for ecological enhancement. The favourable conservation status of protected species is unlikely to be impacted by this development. The report sets out measures that can be delivered via condition. The development does not require 24-hour external lighting, other than in the case of the catching period, which will be approximately 24 days a year. There's a requirement via a condition that any lighting for the site be designed to have minimal impact and reduce to acceptable levels any lighting of the site being emitted from the site, with an emphasis on being astronomy friendly. This will be supplemented by an appropriate landscape scheme. On this basis, your officers are satisfied that the proposal accords with policy 40 of the LPP2. There is no evidence available to suggest that heat haze will be a problem for the observatory. Section 36(6) of the Town and Country Planning Act, as amended by the 2004 Act, states that determination must be made in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Your officers consider that the proposed development would accord with the national and local policies for this form of development. In addition, your officers consider that the proposal would not materially harm the character and appearance of the area or amenity of nearby residents and would not impact upon road and pedestrian safety. It has also been designed to provide mature landscaping in order to mitigate and minimise its visual impact on the wider landscape. The details submitted illustrated that the resultant environmental impact would be mitigated. The flood risk, noise, water and air quality matters have been properly and fully taken into account by the relevant bodies. Taking into consideration these factors, the proposal is considered to comply with the relevant policies at local and national level, as set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. In conclusion, there are no significant factors in this case that indicate against the proposal and outweigh the factors in favour of the proposal, and the policies referred to above. Furthermore, the proposal is considered a sustainable form of agricultural development within the countryside, which have the benefit of benefit to the wider rural economy. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions put forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that lengthy presentation.
Oh, right. Yeah, can you, yeah, we'll just talk you through the slide. We'd have taken slides and from various positions around the site, and we'll talk you through those. It's not very clear, is it? We've tried to take pictures from various points. As you can see there, this is around the junction and the access to the site, and it shows the woodlands in the distance and the access point, which is number 3. Again, this shows the access point where the gates are and various positions as shown on the slides along the wood line, and then back towards the road along the proposed access track.
Excuse me, but we can't see. It's not too dark. Just carry on. We did the lights.
Chair, will just carry on. Yeah. I don't know. Okay, this is the next selection of slides. Again, it's number 11 is the pond that's in the woods. As you can see, it's completely dried up. The other photographs are just around the woodland, as shown on the centre slide. This is arranged or a selection of slides, again taken from the position shown from the road, showing the access again just further up on number 13, and then back towards the woodland and up towards the number 14. That's from the road up to the gap between the two woodlands. These slides are taken from the gateway adjacent to the site, looking at all directions around the site. 19, 20 and 18. 19 is towards the site itself, as is 20, and the view 17 and 18 are in the opposite direction to demonstrate where the site would be and what could be seen from the site. 21 is back down the hill from the site towards the road and the footpath. 23 is the style that goes at the bottom of the hill towards Keeper's Cottage. And 24 is towards Keeper's Cottage. And 22 is again back towards the woodland up the footpath. And the development would be on the right side of that top wood. 27 again is from adjacent to the wood line just outside the village up the hill. 26 again in a similar direction. 27 is up the hill again, so that is the view from the edge of the village, as is 28, and that shows a redundant building already in the countryside there. And these are more pictures just around the site from the positions you can see on the board from the road. 31 is up the footpath that's there towards the woodlands, and 32 is again at the bottom, and 30 is a view from across the valley. This is the site layout and its relationship to Althorpe. This is the plan of the site itself, showing the 4 sheds and the associated facilities with it, and the bund, which is, as you can see, is on the north of the site. These are the buildings that will be associated with it, and this is the traffic management plan that's been submitted. And that the red route is the route that traffic will be expected to take, taking it away from the village. And again, this is just the layout of the site and the proposed buildings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. The speakers for this one. The first one is the planning agent, Mr. Ian Pick. If you'd like to come and sit. You have 5 minutes to speak. You will be told when it's nearing the end at 30 seconds. It's the button on the right that you have to press, and there's a drink there if you wish one. Okay.
Chairman, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak. This proposal fits squarely within the definition of agriculture in section 336 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. As an agricultural development, the proposal is automatically acceptable in principle within the open countryside and the green belt, within the National Planning Policy Framework and the local plan. In our opinion, the application site is an exceptional location for this type of development. It's very well concealed in terms of landscape impacts by woodland and topography. The site has direct access to the A46 strategic road network. The site is far enough away from residential neighbours to ensure that all regulatory standards for the protection of amenity are met. The application has been subject to an environmental impact assessment, and detailed assessments provided with regard to the relevant regulatory standards, and these form part of the planning submission on ammonia, odour, noise, flood risk and drainage, ecology, landscape and visual impact, heritage and transport. The technical reports provided within the application submission are not simply accepted on face value. They are subject to detailed scrutiny by independent experts within the statutory consultee framework to determine their robustness. The application has no objections from any of the technical consultees. Specific concerns have been raised in objections regard to ammonia impacts. These concerns are completely unfounded. Natural England have clear assessment criteria regarding to the impact of ammonia to the environment, and this application has predicted impacts regarded as insignificant. Impacts of wildlife and protected species have been fully considered within the application and subject to review by the Council's planning ecologist, and who has offered no objections. The applicant is also working with Notts Wildlife Trust and making habitat improvements within the adjacent woodland under a programme of works. Noise has been raised as a particular issue in objections. Noise has been considered in detail to the appropriate British standard BS 4142, and this predicts a low impact, which is acceptable under the standards. The noise assessment has been scrutinised by the EHO and the findings have been agreed. In terms of landscape and visual impacts, the site is well concealed. As an agricultural development, and therefore appropriate development in the countryside and the green belt, some visibility is not unacceptable. Due to woodland and topography, essentially the only views of the site from the northwest, and mitigation has been proposed to filter this view. We've held detailed discussions with the Observatory and put forward a number of amendments at the request of the Observatory. These include bunding and mature tree planting on the north side of the development, an agreement to provide an astronomer-friendly lighting scheme, which is controlled by a planning condition. The site only requires nighttime lighting during the catching process, and this is limited to 23 nights a year. We have also agreed to share our catching programme with the Observatory. We have investigated the suggested heat haze issue, and this simply does not exist. There is no heat haze from this type of development. There is some air turbulence above the fans for a couple of meters, but certainly nowhere near the hundreds of meters into the sky, which would be required to impact on the observatory's viewing abilities. In terms of energy efficiency, the systems are designed to be as efficient as possible. Since the application was submitted, energy markets have been subject to very significant price rises, and therefore the development will now require solar panels on the south-facing roofs, will also require the installation of heat recovery units. These issues could be controlled by the imposition of an additional planning condition. The application has been subject to detailed scrutiny by the statutory consultees, who are professionals in their field. There are no technical objections to this proposal by the consultees, and as such, there is no defensible reason for refusal. As a planning application, decisions should be made based on the technical assessment against the local and national planning policies, rather than based on a referendum on desirability. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mr. Peake. Well within your time. Our next speaker
Hello,
is remotely joining us remotely from New York.
Could you switch yours off for a minute? Sorry, just switch your microphone off. Mr. Bowden, are you there? If you'd like to put your camera on and your microphone on so we can hear you, please. Mr. Bowden? Yep. Just see if he's there. Just unmute. Mr. Bowden, can you hear us? I'd like to welcome you to the Planning Committee.
Hello, can you hear me?
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. Welcome to Planning Committee.
Thank you.
If you have 5 minutes to do your representation, and you can start whenever you'd like now. Thank you.
Thank you. We support the representations which Councillor Combalak will make, including about health risk, ammonia, and other emissions. I'm going to concentrate on 3 of the significant adverse impacts. On Owthorpe, on Church Farm Care Home and its vulnerable residents, and on the Nottingham Astronomical Society Observatory. The proposed location is too close to Owthorpe. The nearest house is within 300 metres. If you travel 700 metres, you've gone through the village and left it behind. Compare Stragglethorpe, where there is plenty of evidence of odour problems in Crockwell Bishop and Crockwell Butler and beyond. The nearest property in Crockwell Bishop is over 1,100 metres away, and they are also protected by Stragglethorpe being concealed on the other side of the ridge, yet they still suffer. Owthorpe is half the distance away, and this site will not sit in a hollow on the other side of the ridge, but on top of the ridge, visible for miles across the Vale of Belvoir, with the large gable end fans pointing towards Owthorpe, expelling odour, emissions and noise over Althorpe in that direction, and helped by the wind, which habitually sweeps down Althorpe Hill. The applicant relies on reports from consultants habitually used by Mr. Pick for his applications, including even being owned by Mr. Pick. Not that you would have a clue that they were not independent from reading those reports. The methodology, presentation of results, and even the figure used for the amount of odour produced per bird have changed from the analysis put forward by the same consultants to secure permission for Stragglethorpe. No justification is put forward for why a chicken hatched in 2022 will smell less than a chicken hatched in 2017. What has changed is that they need to say it will smell less because the people are closer. This is no basis to blight the historic village of Althorpe and disregard the quality of life and health of every single person who lives there, let alone for a development which benefits only the applicant. It is said that the Environment Agency, as a statutory consultee, have scrutinised this. They have not as yet. It was not submitted to them by Mr. Pick. Cross over the A46, and before you descend into Cotgrave, you have the Church Farm Rusticus Care Home, a newly extended care home providing the highest quality of respite, recuperation and permanent care towards the end of life to 93 residents. It provides 30 dedicated beds to ease the pressure on NHS hospitals, taking patients out of hospital to prepare them to return to their own homes. There is a massive shortage of such facilities. Access to the 2.5 acres of beautiful grounds is key to the quality of life and health of those residents. There'll be many days of the year when residents will not go outside because it stinks, when the new ventilation system designed to bring that clean, fresh air inside will instead be introducing stench. When the Care Quality Commission inspect care homes, an overarching question inspectors ask themselves is, would you put your mum in here? I suggest you ask yourselves that. A home where they may not on some days be able to go outside, or will spend days of the year surrounded by stench and unable to get away. Or would you be concerned that this is not perhaps the best place for someone suffering acute breathing difficulties, as 60 out of the 93 current residents do? This is a £7 million investment for some of the most vulnerable people, and we're lucky to have it in our community. Are the commercial interests of just one applicant worth that impact? The NAS Observatory will be rendered unusable by this development. The observatory looks south, away from the light pollution of Nottingham. The poultry farm lies directly in that line about 900 metres away. It's impossible to know whether the suggested astronomy-friendly lighting will be effective, both because there is no specific proposal and because the light will be so close to the observatory. There'll be many years of adverse impacts before the trees on the bund provide any useful screen. But there is no mitigation at all for the heat haze, which will constantly be emitted from the sheds, through the roof, the chimneys, from the fans. Hot air rises. Astrophotography requires exposures of many minutes or hours, which can be over multiple nights, to obtain clear images
30 seconds.
Of galaxies and stars, thousands or even millions of light years away. Heat haze makes it look like looking through a rippling swimming pool. It doesn't make the observatory less good, it breaks it. One of the largest amateur observatories in the UK, developed over 40 years with tens of thousands of man-hours volunteered to make it happen. The handout shows some of that history and work. Ask yourselves whether you want to tear that up, destroy it, throw away the work of many people for a development which benefits only the applicant.
That's time.
This is not.
I am sorry about that. We do have to be strict on the time and treat each speaker with the same amount of courtesy. But I'm sorry, we don't take questions from the audience. In all conscience, I have to object to the following grounds. Ammonia emissions and pollutants plus incineration give rise to health concerns, impacting the rural community of Althorpe, children's nursery and nursing home nearby. Impact on the observatory, heat plume from the operation cannot be mitigated. Will prevent long exposure astrophotography, important for scientific research. No demonstration of net biodiversity net gain. Visual impact on the unit looming over the village of Althorpe, detrimental to the area. The footprint of the poultry farm nearly as large as Althorpe itself. Impact and pollution on Grade 1 17th century St Margaret's Church, remains of manor and historic fish ponds. This is an important historical area. Plus, there have been a catalogue of uncorrected errors throughout this planning process, and the report therefore shouldn't be relied upon. It's unsafe and misleading. Photographs shown, not representational. My overriding objection to this application is potential damage to health. Nearest receptor or curtilage now established 285 metres away, less than 3 football pitches. Rushcliffe Borough Council has a duty of care. Wind blows directly across the Vale of Belvoir and Althorpe, whilst 285 metres, not 3 football pitches, is considered far enough away. Sun blows from the Sahara. Noise, dust, pollutants, ammonia and flies will affect the neighbouring population on calm days. Humans smell ammonia at 20 parts per million. The Environment Agency allows 25 ppm. According to government codes of good agricultural practice, ammonia causes respiratory damage of 5 parts per million. Information circulating in Appendix 1. Air scrubbers fitted on poultry housing reduce ammonia by 90%. Government currently requires scrubbers on 4 or more units. There are at least 6 poultry farms within a 5-mile radius, one with biomass generator 1 kilometre away. Therefore, at least 24 units cumulatively. This is also an intensive cattle farming area already generating ammonia. Toxicity of ammonia increases with traffic emissions. A46, only 3 football pitches away. Inclusion of an incinerator as per the Environment Agency licence application would increase pollution, not included in the planning application or report. MP Ruth Edwards forwarded my letter to DEFRA, getting the Minister Joe Churchill's response. The use of chemical and acid air scrubbers to remove ammonia emissions for exhaust air of mechanically ventilated poultry housing is currently recognised as a BAT, best available technique. Introduction of mandatory design standards for new livestock housing was one of the government commitments in the Clean Air Strategy. The Astrological Observatory at Cotgrave will no longer be able to operate. The observatory has a fixed telescope to survey dark skies across the Vale, taking detailed astrophotography of valued scientific importance. The heat plume and light from the unit will make this impossible. Such is the concern that objections from Jodrell Bank, Lord Rees, the Astronomer Royal, our MP Ruth Edwards and the Nottingham Astrological Society were received. This is not a group of hobbyists. Data from this observatory is of value to the nation. The sleepy village of Althorpe, which stands to be dominated by this poultry farm, dates back to the 11th century, home to Hutchinson, the parliamentarian who signed Charles I's death warrant during the Civil War. The manor house was burnt down in the early 19th century, but the old fish ponds and the surrounding trees remain, along with Grade 1 listed St Margaret's Church. Viewed from the southeast, this industrial unit will look as though it sits on top of the village, totally out of keeping with its surroundings. Should this application be approved, I ask the following additional conditions. Acid air scrubbers be fitted on all poultry housing. Traffic scheme avoiding the village. Landscaping, mature trees, hedges and bund to be conditioned. Borehole not permitted without environmental consultation. No incinerators installed without planning permission and further odour report. No expansion of the unit or increase in poultry housing permitted. Working hours and deliveries restricted 0700 to 1700. No weekend or bank holidays to limit residential disturbance. Notification of all pesticides used to control flies. I might add, the new condensed committee reports are totally unsafe. Thank you. Thank you. I will continue. Do you wish to answer any of those reports? Not at this stage. Thank you. Okay, councillors. I'd just like you to bear in mind that many emotional points have been made on this application. Let's look at it objectively. And you please bear in mind that the experts that have been consulted on issues which are causing concern have been external ones, not local. So with those remarks from me, who wishes to start? Any members wishing to begin? Councillor Mason, please.
Okay, thank you. I read this with interest, really, because the Greenbelt's very close to my heart. I've recently had an application, not for anything like this, but one of the results of that was that the planning inspector refused the application because of the Greenbelt. He also said that initially, and it was pointed out, initially, not enough weight was given to the Greenbelt. I feel that actually the Greenbelt is very, I think it should be protected. And I think we all do. And if I really look at this, I cannot see that any other considerations outweigh the fact that the Greenbelt should be protected. It's not just the Greenbelt, though. It is the fact that of the odour, the inconvenience to Althorpe, which is really quite near. And the nearest one is only, is it 300 metres? 300 metres. And that Althorpe is still relatively close. Therefore, part of the reason is the Greenbelt, and part of it is the actual people who live in Althorpe and will have to, as far as I can see, put up with the application. It covers quite a sizable area, and I've put here that actually it is a large industrial application. I've also read here that yes, a lot of farming is industrial now, and I agree with that, but I still feel that this is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt and will impact the local people there. Therefore, I would like to put forward the motion to refuse it on those grounds of the Greenbelt, inappropriate development, and also odour. I don't know about noise. I'm not totally convinced about noise, but I am about the odour and also the Greenbelt.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Microphone on, Chairman.
Sorry, I wish Mr. Ashcroft wishes to make a remark before you start. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just give members some advice on Greenbelt, and it's quite relevant that you make that point, because plainly you've seen the slides. Those of you who know the location will see that it's very open, it's very green, it is within the Greenbelt. Our policies in our local plan effectively reflect national policy. A national policy on the Greenbelt is captured in section 13 of the National Planning Policy Framework. I won't bore you for the next 10 minutes with what Greenbelt policy say, but I'll try to summarise it very succinctly. But paragraph 137 effectively says the government attaches great importance to Greenbelts, as do our officers, as I know do members. The fundamental aim of Greenbelt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. So Greenbelts are about openness. national guidance then goes on to say, and it's perhaps a statement of matter of fact, inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Members will be used to taking that protective view towards green belts. However, paragraph 149 of the NPPF says a local planning authority should regard the construction of new buildings, which plainly these are, as inappropriate in the green belt. And then it lists a series of exceptions. And the first exception is buildings for agriculture and forestry. Now, plainly, members might have their own view about whether these are traditional agricultural buildings, but I think it's commonly accepted that this is an agricultural use. These are buildings for agriculture, and therefore they are not inappropriate in the green belt. Plainly, one of the characteristics of the green belt is that it does allow traditional farming to take place, and part of that traditional farming is that there needs to be buildings. So, with the greatest of respect, I think it's fair to say that I don't think there's a sustainable argument for refusing this application on green belt grounds. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ashcroft. You wish to come back, Councillor Mason?
Yeah, okay. First of all, I can't say that I personally, and this is all subjective, isn't it, as your decision has been, it's not all written in stone. You have to look at it as a whole. I don't consider that it's traditional. I feel that the buildings and the towers and the height isn't, and I still feel that I mean, you could go on with the reasons why, and we've heard quite a few of them already. And I know that the council always likes to support businesses, but I think that personally, I think that this is a step too far. And when you look at the map and you hear how close it is, and that because of the way it is, and that the predominant wind that is there, as from what I have read, the odour will not exactly be blown away, and I still feel that I feel that we should not accept the recommendation in the document.
If I might, Chair.
Yes, please.
Councillor Mason, having heard what you've just said after hearing the advice from Mr. Ashcroft, Mr. Ashcroft's absolutely right in terms of how Greenbelt policy is formulated, but you mentioned about the sort of appearance and the height of the buildings and the impact on Althorpe. So that is more an impact on the local landscape point rather than being a specific Greenbelt point. So without putting words in your mouth, but maybe a reason for refusal based on Greenbelt, as Mr. Ashcroft had said, would not be defensible because he's cited the NPPF. But as you said, subjective on appearance and character is a decision for the decision maker, for all of you to consider, and therefore a reason for refusal based around appearance and character is maybe something that you'd like to consider as an alternative. Similarly, odour, whether there's any undue impact on residential amenity as the second reason around odour. You said you weren't quite sure on noise, but just have those kind of considerations in mind for the reasons for refusal.
Are those acceptable to you, Councillor Mason?
Sorry. I couldn't hear what you said, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Are those acceptable to you?
Yes.
The reasons you wish to include them?
Yes.
Oh, we'll now go to Councillor Clark, who was going to second your proposal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Sorry. Oh dear. Need a bit more WD-40 in the engine. Right, maybe I might be able to help clarify a few of those points on in planning terms. I've been feverishly writing lots of notes while all the various presentations have been taking place, which have helped me quite considerably, actually, in coming to a viewpoint. The easiest one, actually, to deal with, Madam Chairman, is flooding, because it's on top of a hill. So I think perhaps flooding is not going to be much of an issue. So I'll discard that one. Let's talk about the greenbelt first of all, because, and I'll bear in mind, we hear a lot in various applications about traditional farming. This is industrial farming, and I don't think we should get away from that. This isn't traditional farming at all. And in case anybody's any doubt, I've just looked up, Google's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Definition of agriculture: the science, art, or practice of cultivating the soil, producing crops, and raising livestock, and in varying degrees, the preparation and marketing of the resulting products. That doesn't relate to big industrial buildings. Now, the greenbelt, and if I can direct you to on page 34 to paragraph 56, where the assessment says, and I quote, "In view of the above," which is basically assessment of the greenbelt, "it is considered the proposal would not result in a significant interruption to the greenbelt in this location." Putting large industrial buildings on the top of a hill is not, to me, something that would not result, that's two negatives, isn't it? It is something that would result in a significant interruption to the greenbelt. And this is where corporate history needs to come into play, Madam Chairman. And I know it's this application and not others, but I cannot help but quote some years ago, 5 years, I can't remember when it was, there was an application in Althorpe itself for a conservatory extension. And that was refused because it was going to interrupt the greenbelt. How can the officers possibly propose that this proposal does not interrupt the greenbelt, and yet a conservatory in the middle of a village would interrupt the greenbelt? It's just not compatible. So if you relate that then, and the solicitor was quite right in wanting to bring out more clarity in the proposal that Councillor Mason has put, with the proposer's permission, I would be hoping to help clarify. I'll just refer, first of all, to the planning agent. And you need to be careful what phrases you use, because he used the phrase, "This proposal," and I quote, "will be well concealed in respect of topography." I'm back to my dictionary definitions, Madam Chairman, of concealed. Concealed, dictionary definition, quote, "kept secret, hidden, kept out of sight, or hidden from view." That's the dictionary definition of the word concealed. These are industrial buildings proposed on the top of a hill. I relate it to the poultry farm that's not that far away, at Strugglethorpe. That is in, if you like, almost a bait or a very shallow basin. It's the reverse of this. This is on top of a hill. It's visible from a long way away. And I'm sorry, I do not hold with this bit about landscaping will conceal it, because I could quote you several large industrial applications where trees have supposedly been planted to conceal the industrial buildings some years ago, and they haven't even started to make an impact. You can still see the industrial buildings, and you can hardly see the saplings or the trees that are supposed to be there. So I have no confidence at all that these buildings will be concealed by landscaping. at all. Given the fact there's also a bund was proposed, I think, if I remember correctly, of 2 meters in height, when the buildings are, I seem to recall, I think it was 8 meters. So there's still 6 meters of visible building. That's in English money, that's 20 feet above the bund, which will still be visible from across the countryside. So for me, the visual amenity of this proposal is very high on the list of reasons to refuse, in terms of the fact that it will have a major visual impact on the surrounding countryside that cannot be, I quote, concealed. If I then turn to, I mean, I have a problem with a lot of expert opinions if they are a desktop exercise. Quite often you find that these experts don't actually come to visit the site. It's on the desktop. I would be interested to know, and I'm just going to pause for a second while I ask one of the officers a question, Madam Chairman, and then I'll come back and carry on. Because Mr. Cook used the phrase, this proposal will be astronomy friendly. I'd like to know what he meant by astronomy friendly.
Sorry, we were talking about the light impact, and there is a requirement in the conditions that a lighting scheme be submitted that is astronomy friendly, which will need to be done by a professional light engineer or mitigation person, and we will see what they provide. But I don't believe that it's not achievable.
Right, okay, thank you for that. For me, it comes down to the Greenbelt issue, comes down to visual amenity. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice again. I think there is an issue on the lighting, because at the moment, it's an empty field. There is no lighting there at all. You cannot say that there will not be any lighting there. There is bound to be some lighting there. Therefore, the lighting will be an issue, because it will affect the, even at night time, the visual amenity of the countryside. It's in the countryside. In terms of, and I think this is a real prospect, the aspect of ammonia and heat haze. By definition, it's being claimed it's an agricultural operation that generates heat. You can't get away from it, no matter what. There's livestock involved, and there is industrial machinery involved. They produce heat. You can't get away from it. It is there. And we've heard that the heat rising will have an impact on the observatory, and that observatory has been there for whatever it is, 40, 50 years. Can't remember the exact date just offhand, it doesn't matter. So that was established because of its location, and this proposal will have and this is reason number XYZ, this will have a detrimental impact on the operation of the observatory, and therefore that's a reason for refusal as well. I'm just going to ask, another question for the planning officers on page 2. Planning officer comments, C. It says the site does not fall within an area protected by a dark sky policy, and the use of the roof vents is likely to be limited at night. So what does likely mean? It doesn't mean it will be limited. It doesn't mean it will not be limited. What does likely mean? And in terms of the word limited, limited in what way? how will it be limited? I'd appreciate an answer to that question again before I carry on, Madam Chairman.
The roof vents are there to reduce the heat within the building itself, and they're primarily there to address the conditions externally. Normally, you would get the heat during the day, which is causing the issue, which needs the fans to be turned on. At night time, my understanding is that they're unlikely to be used because the temperatures within the building themselves wouldn't necessarily mean that they would need to be used. And on that basis, that's why we made that observation, and why we believe that they're unlikely to be used during the nighttime hours.
Thank you, Chairman. So opening the vents to let the heat out, by definition, heat rises, and therefore is going to be vented into the atmosphere or into the air above. So I think just in summary, Madam Chairman, and with if the proposer is prepared to accept sort of slight tweaking of the reasons for refusal, the impact on the green belt by virtue of its prominence within the open countryside. Openness is mentioned in Greenbelt's policy. So it will have a detrimental effect on the openness of the countryside. The visual amenity, it will have a detrimental impact on the views of the landscape by virtue of industrial buildings interrupting the views of the landscape. The lighting will have a detrimental impact on the night sky, and the potential, doesn't matter whether it's odours, whether it's heat haze, and any lighting will have a detrimental impact on the observatory, which will render the operation of the observatory well, as I say, there'll be some detriment to that. I think I've covered all the points, Madam Chairman. So I don't know whether you'd like to invite the proposer as whether she will accept those additional points as the reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you accept those, Councillor?
Yeah, I do. I agree with everything that Councillor Clark has said, because I do think that this is inappropriate development, and I've seen nothing that will change my mind on that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to point out, Councillor Clark, that page 43, the condition 9 says there is astronomy-friendly lighting, which has been used elsewhere. I do know that. So, Mr. Court, do you want to answer any more of the points that were raised?
I don't think so. I think I was asked the questions individually, and really the only thing to reiterate is the fact that by definition, notwithstanding the size, we can't say that the development is inappropriate in the Greenbelt.
Mr. Ashcroft wishes to speak.
Chairman, thank you. And again, I'd just like to restate that point, that we understand members and local residents concerned about the impact on the character of the landscape. Certainly, that was the first thing that I looked at. Plainly, on the one hand, you can see how the applicant has attempted carefully to position this proposal well back from the road and within the existing tree cover that is already in and around the application site. On the other hand, as members say, as local residents have said, it's in an elevated place, and that may or may not have some impact in terms of which way the odour and any dust might move forward. But effectively, Greenbelt policy is Greenbelt policy. What I've tried to do here is to filter the comments from Councillor Mason and Councillor Clark and put them in officer type reasons for refusal. If I might read those out, Chairman, so that at least we can see whether those might be acceptable to Councillor Clark and Councillor Mason. The first one would be, I think, what the members are saying, and again, you'll excuse me if for technical reasons I take out any reference to the Greenbelt because of the advice I've previously given to you. The scale and massing of the proposed buildings would have an unacceptable impact on the appearance and the character of the local landscape by virtue of their prominence. As such, the proposal would be contrary to the provisions of policy 22.3a of the Rushcliffe Local Plan Part 2. So effectively, that's got to focus on visual amenity and the character of the local landscape. The second one would be the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the proposal would not have any undue impact on the amenity of residential properties in this part of the borough by virtue of lighting, ammonia and heat haze. As such, the proposal would fail to meet the requirements of Policy 10 of the Rushcliffe Local Plan Part 1 and Policy 1 of the Rushcliffe Local Plan Part 2. Mrs. Sells might be able to give us some specific advice about whether there's a valid reason for refusal of the direct impact of a planning proposal on the operation of another building, in this case, the observatory, or whether that's more generally tackled through the impact on lighting.
Thank you. The second condition that Mr. Ashcroft just read is more general, but as you heard, was targeted at residential properties, which is presumably what Policy 10 states. So if you were still concerned about the impact on the observatory, then you may want to consider a separate reason specifically in relation to the impact on light pollution. For that, it's in observatories are mentioned in the planning practice guidance, so we can link that one directly to the MPPF if that is preferable in terms of light pollution.
With your permission, Madam Chairman, I thought I did actually itemise it as the impact on the observatory as a specific reason. That was certainly my intention. Just wanted to clarify a couple of other things as well, Madam Chairman, because certainly I definitely support the government's ambition for growth, but this is where proportionality comes in, and again the impact on the Greenbelt is proportionality comes in, and in my view the on balance of proportionality, this has a more of a detrimental impact on the Greenbelt than the reasons to accept its appropriateness.
And that's appreciated in terms of members' views on the Greenbelt, but as you've heard from officers, agricultural buildings in the Greenbelt are an exemption and are not considered to be an appropriate development. That is the way that the policy is phrased. So in terms of being able to argue that it's not an exemption and it is inappropriate, the council would struggle because it is an agricultural building.
I think I adequately provided the evidence of the definition of agriculture, that these are industrial buildings. This isn't an agricultural operation.
What we have to fall back on is the definition of agriculture in the Town and Country Planning Act. Section 336 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 defines agriculture as including, here's the list, horticulture, fruit growing, seed growing, dairy farming, the breeding and keeping of livestock, including any creature kept for the production of food, wool, skins or fur, or for the purpose of its use for the farming of land. Probably the first and the last time I'll ever read the definition of agriculture, but there it is. That is effectively the definition of agriculture, and that is then transposed into the MPPF for, as Mrs. Sells has confirmed, is effectively development that is not inappropriate within the Greenbelt. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think you had a good say. Councillor Thomas has indicated she wishes to speak, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was going to make the point that Greenbelt policy is not the only policy that governs acceptability of uses in the countryside, and we are looking at policy 22, local plan part 2, which does accept agricultural buildings, but as Mr. Ashcroft has said, part 3 of that policy, 3A, says that agricultural buildings will be permitted where the appearance and character of the landscape, including its historic character and features such as habitats, views, settlement pattern, rivers, watercourses, field patterns, industrial heritage and local distinctiveness, is conserved and enhanced. And that is the paragraph that would which applies in this case, notwithstanding the discussion about Greenbelt. So I was glad that Mr. Ashcroft said that, because I've been wanting to say that for a while. So I think that is the reason. This application would be equally unacceptable if this area was not in the Greenbelt. It's unacceptable in the countryside, in Rushcliffe, and that is the point that I would make. On the other reasons for refusal, I think we're saying kind of not proved in terms of odour and lighting and ammonia and particulates and dust, and I would add noise to that list also. I know Councillor Mason said that she didn't have concerns about noise, but I have concerns about noise. This is a fairly, there's going to be a lot of traffic coming and going here, and there is going to be a lot of noise that is heard down in the village. Now, again, I think there have been sufficient queries raised by the residents to question whether the evidence that's been provided by the applicant is actually showing that that's been dealt with. I accept that the answer might be that it is dealt with, but I think it needs further investigation. So I think it should be added to the list of things that are not proved in this case. As for the other issues that have been raised, I think the transport issue of the lorries going through the village because they've missed the turning, I think that's quite weak actually, but it would require conditioning. And if this application, if this vote is, goes so that we would permit the application, I would want to look at conditions on that and various other things. So that's it. Thank you.
Chairman, I support continued diversification of agricultural businesses in the rural community, and each application needs to be judged on its merits, but it shouldn't negatively impact on the neighbouring community. I think the fact that the chicken sheds are going to be on the ridge of the hill is going to be horrific in terms of looking up from the Vale of Belvoir. You will see this for miles and miles around. Now, the thing that also concerns me is I've been looking at length some of the comments from academics who are obviously concerned about the observatory. And it was interesting to have to read that there are fewer and fewer dark sky sites available. We have a dark sky site available. That is where the observatory is. And it's a natural resource. And it's something rather like having clean air, clean rivers, and having dark skies so that the observatory can function. Now, I have looked and I have seen a lecturer in theoretical physics at the University of Leicester objecting to this, Professor Michael Merrifield, the School of Physics and Astronomy at the Nottingham University, and also Professor Michael Merriford, the school of that's one, and the other one was, that was it, Professor Ian Morris at Drodrell Bank Observatory. Now, if you have academics of this calibre and they voice concerns about the effect the light pollution and the heat haze will have, I find that worrying. And as one person said, you need a dark, still sky. You will no longer have as dark a sky as we currently have if this lighting was to go ahead. But I can't see how you are going to have a still sky, a dark, still sky, if you have a heat haze that is obviously going to come from these 4 chicken sheds. So my concerns are that if we don't take these academic advice on board, they have the knowledge that we clearly haven't got. And if they object to this for academic reasons, I think that we would be very foolish to disregard their comments, because I think that we'll be failing people in Rushcliffe. And of course, the observatory at Cropwell Bishop on Cropwell Wolds does a lot of outreach work with school children and college students and so on. And we do need an educated workforce that is going to be encouraged to come into the sciences and to actually produce scientific findings for us as a country. So I think that if we ignore this information we have, it'll be at our peril. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay. I've no other speakers, so are we going to are we clear on the reasons for refusal? Everyone.
Can I just seek final clarification from the mover and seconder on those reasons, having heard the advice from officers and obviously the comments from each of you? Can you just confirm the reasons for refusal, please?
I think I've just been nominated by the proposer. We first of all had, sorry, I'm still think it is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt by virtue of.
No, that's fine if that's the reason then.
It's by virtue of the industrial nature and the prominence of the proposal. Then the visual amenity, the significant impact on the views of the proposal from the countryside will have a detrimental impact on the scenery, on the views from the landscape. What has been mentioned, the noise, odour, lighting, and there was a fourth one, I can't remember what it was now. Heat haze.
Just because Mr. Ashcroft had formulated from both of your comments 2 reasons for refusal, which related to policy, framed in the way that we would put them on the decision notice. So in terms of those that Mr. Ashcroft read out, would those satisfy your second reason on visual impact and your third reason in terms of noise, odour, general sort of undue impact on residential amenity? I'm sorry to probe, but we have to make sure we've got reasons.
Sure, absolutely. No problem with that.
If you need Mr. Ashcroft
I confess I can't. With your permission, Madam Chairman, could Mr. Ashcroft repeat, because I can't remember the exact phrasing he used.
Absolutely, sir. Chairman, the first one, as I read it out last time without mention of the Greenbelt, is the scale and massing of the proposed buildings would have an unacceptable impact on the appearance and character of the local landscape by virtue of their prominence. As such, the proposal will be contrary to the provisions of policy 22(3)(a) of the Rushcliffe Local Plan Part 2. The second one was the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the proposal would not have any undue impact on the amenity of residential properties in this part of the borough by virtue of lighting, ammonia, heat haze and noise. As such, the proposal will fail to meet the requirements of Policy 10 of Rushcliffe Local Plan Part 1 and Policy 1 of Rushcliffe Local Plan Part 2. Chairman, we've then had the discussion, the third proposed reasons for refusal, which is about the very specific impacts on the operation and use of the observatory. Odor, yes, yeah. Thank you. Yes.
So does that wording take into account the detrimental impact on the countryside?
So if you wanted a Greenbelt reason for refusal, then I suggest that's a separate reason for refusal. So it would be 4 reasons for refusal. Right.
Yeah, and then so if you include in that, then the detrimental impact on the observatory. Yeah.
Councillor Mason, you were the initial mover of that. Is everything acceptable to you? Thank Thank you. Everybody clear on the motion? We're going to the vote of no further speakers and the reasons for it. Okay. So all those in favour of the motion to refuse, please show. Thank you. I think at this point, we've due to take a slight break. If anyone wishes to leave, and we could be back by 4:15, please, with that clock. Yeah, that gives you 10 minutes. That's 2 minutes.
Are we nearly ready to make a start? It's much better with lights down low.
Yes, it is.
They're far too bright though. I far prefer it like this. Yeah, it's far better. But also, I actually find that the bright lights dazzle as well. Gentlemen, we need to carry on. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Well, please take a seat.
The meeting is still unfinished. Right.
Rest of your chat out there.
Mine's died.
Right, we're all back, so welcome back. I presume the YouTube is back online. Okay, so we have two more applications to discuss and decide this afternoon. The next one is the Smithy, 45 Church Street, Ruddington. This is the erection of one two-storey detached dwelling. It's a resubmission of a previous application number. And Mr. Cook, please, if you talk us through this. Thank you.
Thank you. This application relates to the erection of a dwelling adjacent to 45 Church Street, Ruddington. The site is located within the village of Ruddington, within the conservation area. Members will note the High Street and Village Centre to the east, and the Medical Centre, Library, Co-op, and the other commercial community uses further north on Church Street, and the Ruddington Green to the south. To the rear east of the property is a Grade 2 listed former framework knitter's shop, now occupied by Alfred Cook Machinists Limited, and newly constructed two-storey properties with accommodation in the roof space on Parkin Street, numbers 17, 19, 21 and 23. West of the proposed site is at the end of Chapel Street is a Grade 2 listed framework knitters cottage and the Grade 2 listed framework knitters workshop and detached outbuildings, which are all now part of the museum. These two photos show the street scene and the general character of the area. The application site itself is located adjacent to the detached house. Three-bedroomed house and detached single-storey garage sits to the north side of that plot, set behind a modern, now low boundary wall, and that is the site, and the garage will be removed. Again, that is the site, and again, that is the existing detached house which has been modernised. looking south to the newly refurnished, this is the adjacent property, number 39 Church Street, looking south towards the application site. So the application site is behind that single-storey building. The rear garden of 39 Church Street, looking east towards the new building and Parking Street. Photo 9 is the rear boundary of the application site, and that is the new build at the rear of the site. The relationship between the existing garage on site and the side of 39 Church Street. Photo 11 is the application site looking forward towards the road. The next slide shows the existing driveway retained for the neighbouring property at number 45. Again, that's looking from the rear of the site towards the road. And the application site looking towards 39 Church Street. The application seeks permission for the erection of a two-storey, two-bedroom detached dwelling on land between number 45 Church Street and 39 Church Street. Parking space is proposed to the front with access off Church Street. The main planning issues relevant to this application are the impact on the character of the area, the impact on the conservation area and heritage assets, impact on residential amenity and highway safety. Further details relating to these and other material considerations are given in the report. The application site is located within the village centre and is acceptable in principle for residential use. The dwelling is of a modern design with render proposed as the facing material and grey tiles to the roof, which would appear similar to the neighbouring property number 45. The overall design and appearance of the dwelling is considered to be sympathetic to the character of the area. The proposed site plan indicates that the rear garden would have an area of approximately 52 square metres. While this is marginally below the perimeter set out in the residential design guide, other properties along Church Street have similar sized gardens, and the garden size reflects the character and nature of the area. As such, officers consider that the level of amenity space to be adequate for a two-bedroom property, given its location. The single-storey detached garage that is present on the site is considered to be of no special architectural or historic interest and is considered to be a neutral feature within the conservation area. No concerns have been raised by the conservation officer regarding its removal. The new building would be highly visible from the public realm. The conservation officer considers that the proposed layout form, including the height, scale and mass and design, to be appropriate and the materials not to be harmful. A low boundary wall would be present to the front boundary. The materials are high quality and attractive, and reference those already used in the conservation area. Concerns have been raised by neighbours relating to overshadowing and overbearing impact. Full consideration is set out in paragraphs 35 to 43 of your reports, and overall officers are satisfied that development proposed would not have a significant detrimental impact on the residential amenity of adjoining properties. In terms of parking provision, the Highway Authority design guide states that for three-bedroom dwellings, they must be able to provide 2 parking spaces per unit. The proposal includes provision of 1 off-street parking space and a cycle store. The provision of 1 space is not raised as a highway safety concern, and the site is suitably located with on-street parking controls and limited overspill parking. Its site is considered sustainable in the location with various amenities available in walking distance. The proposal is therefore considered to be acceptable and a recommendation for grant permission subject to the conditions set out. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one speaker on this item, who is Mr. George Machin. So if you'd like to come to the table, please. I'm sure you were here for the previous item, so the way it works is as soon as you're ready, press the right-hand button, the red light will come on and you've got up to 5 minutes to talk to us. Okay. Thank you.
Chair, I'm speaking in support of the application on behalf of the applicant. The application seeks permission for a 2-bedroom dwelling on land between 2 properties fronting Church Street in Ruddington.
A detached garage currently sits on the plot which would be removed. The proposed new home would have front and rear garden and a parking space. The Conservation Officer highlights that the proposal would actually enhance the appearance of the site and therefore the conservation area. The proposed materials are high quality and attractive and reference those used within the conservation area. Professional officers recommend that planning permission is granted, subject to planning conditions. Highways have provided formal comments on the application and state that whilst the parking standards within the Nottinghamshire Highway Design Guide require a minimum of 2 parking spaces for 2 dwellings, the provision of only 1 space in this location is not considered to result in a highway safety concern. It's acknowledged that the site is located in a sustainable location with a range of day-to-day destinations accessible without the use of the car. The site is also well served by public transport. Accordingly, the Highway Authority raised no objection to the proposal. It's worth highlighting actually that planning officers have considered it necessary to impose a condition on any planning condition granted in order to secure the parking space for the lifetime of the development. Turning now to objections, I'm aware there has been a single objection from the neighbour at number 39 Church Street. However, members should be reassured by the committee report, which includes a forensic assessment of the application, including an assessment of the proposal regards neighbour amenity, highway safety, and on the character of the area. Officers consider that the scale of the dwelling is moderate for the plot size and replicates similar dwellings along Church Street, including the plot size of the existing dwelling. Officers consider the height of the proposed dwelling to be modest, and due to the separation distance, it's not considered that the proposed dwelling would cause significant overbearing impacts to number 39. The side window facing this neighbour has also been conditioned by officers to be obscurely glazed and fixed shut to avoid overlooking. The report concludes that the proposal would be visually acceptable and would not cause undue harm to the area or the conservation area. Officers consider that the proposal would not cause significant impacts to highway safety and would not cause undue harm to neighbouring properties. Amendments were made through the life of the application to address issues raised by the council's officers and other interested parties in order to achieve an acceptable scheme for the site. We hope members will now follow your officer's recommendation and grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Machin. That's well within the 5 minutes, so thank you for that. We don't have any other speakers on this, so we can go into a discussion and decision. So would anyone like to make any points? Councillor Healy and then Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I went to have a look at this proposal, actually. Yes, there was one objection, as we've just heard. And the comment really was a bit surprising in that it would exacerbate current parking, make it worse, in other words. But of course, the proposal is to take his car off the street and he's on private parking. So that really, I mean, yes, Ruddington, I think most of us probably know Ruddington, and parking, on-street parking is quite bad, but certainly that has been covered, which I think is a big plus. There was a query on garden space, and perhaps we could just have clarification on that. The feeling was that it wasn't meeting the standard, for want of a better word. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. Yes, there was a note about the garden space, but yes, if you pick up on that, please.
Yeah, the required standard for a two-bedroom dwelling is a area of 55 square meters, and this is proposing 52. So the lack of the extra 3 meters we don't consider as a major issue in this case, and it does reflect the character of other properties in that locality.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I note that the neighbour of number 39 objected. Could we be told which is, as we look at it there, which is 39? Is it to the left or to the right of the proposed property?
Left.
As you look at it, it's the one on the left.
Thank you. Could we have the other slide back again? So that the previous one. Yes, so you can see the number 39 proposed one, and then the one on the right. Yeah, it's the one before last. One before. No. That's it, that's the one, thank you. So it's the one on the left that was complaining. Well, there's a gap, certainly a gap between the two, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
And that's where they've got the obscured glass and it's non-opening windows.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
understand.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, it's a tight site, that's for sure. But the character of Ruddington and the character of this street scene is that there are many varied. I don't know whether tight is the right word, but they're closely located. Should we put it that way? I'm not quite sure what the detriment to number 39 is because I'm looking at Street View and it's a completely blank gable wall. There are no windows in that gable end at all. So not quite sure what the unless it related to maybe to the garden behind the house, perhaps. I suppose the one query might be: are the materials? I'm not suggesting for 1 second that they need to be the same as, but are they of a similar flavour? Shall we put it that way? To the newish that one that's on the right hand side. Looking at Street View, that's quite a new house. I don't know, is it intended that the materials be rendered or as the one on the left and the right are? There we go. Will that be sort of complementary to those, or is it something, are the materials something different?
No, the materials proposed are rendering as per the existing properties are on there. The one on the right hand side of the site is a property that's been refurbished.
Sure. Right. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I think that sometimes, yes, I would be concerned about the parking, but given the fact it's pretty much in the centre of Ruddington, there are buses within easy access, walking distance, and perhaps in this day and age of trying to limit car usage, then there are other means of public transport sort of fairly easily accessible. So I don't have any particular issues with it. It's a tight site. The garden standard is close. So I'm quite happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Do you have a seconder for this one? Oh, Mark, Councillor Healy, I think your hand went up slightly first, so you're happy to second the Councillor Clark's proposed moving the recommendation as per the report. You're seconding it. Does anyone else wish to make any comment? Councillor Thomas.
I was just going to comment that the parking is the issue here, really, because there's only one parking space and 2 would be recommended. And this is an area where parking is a problem. And so I went to the conditions to see what was in there, really, to stop the thing growing anymore and requiring any more cars. And all the conditions I could think of were already in there in terms of extending the property and so on. So on that basis, I would support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas, and indeed, as I think Councillor Clark alluded to, because of the size of the dwelling and the nature of Ruddington and other properties, is quite possible, as we sort of are supposed to use cars less and less, there might not be such a need for off-street parking. But there we are. Anyway, does anyone else wish to come in, or shall we make a decision? I think we're ready to make a decision on this. So we've had the recommendation moved and seconded, moved by Councillor Clark. Councillor who moved it? Was it Councillor? Yes, Councillor Clark, and seconded by Councillor Healy. Recommendation to approve as per the report. Show of hands, please, in favour. And I think that's unanimous, isn't it? So permission is granted as per the report. So thank you very much. So we move. Oh no, this is you again now, isn't it? Yeah. So right, I'll hand over to my Vice Chairman for the final application. Thank you.
Thank you. The next application is by Rushcliffe Borough Council, which is the reason it is before us. It's for Rushcliffe Oaks, Main Road, Stragglethorpe, and it's the installation of freestanding solar photovoltaic generation system and associated works. With Dunn, sorry, will take the presentation on this one.
Thank you, Chair. So the application in front of the committee relates to the installation of a freestanding solar voltaic generation system comprising 4 rows of panels, each with a total length of approximately 43 metres. They propose to be sited in the grounds of the new crematorium, which is being constructed on the area of land on the corner of Stragglethorpe Road and Main Road, Cotgrave. Work is well advanced on the site, and the crematorium will be known as Rushcliffe Oaks. Members should note that this site is in the Greenbelt. The aerial view before you now shows the site in context with the wider area. The site is enclosed by mature hedgerows to the road frontages to the site and to the eastern boundary with the old railway line, which is a multi-user route. The red line on the drawing shows the access into the site leading to the proposed location of the solar arrays. This slide also shows the presence of the solar farm to the south of the site, which is separated from the application site by a public footpath. To help the committee familiarise themselves with the site, I now have a few photos of the surrounding area, including a walk down the public footpath adjoining the site where the proposal is likely to be most visible. So this is a view looking up Main Road towards Cotgrave with the Shepherd's Pub restaurant on the right and the crematorium site on the left. View looking down Main Road towards the junction with Stragglethorpe, and the application site sits behind the mature hedgerow on the right-hand side. Building works are well advanced on site, and this is the view of the crematorium building taken from the start of the footpath, which exists to the southern boundary of the site. So we're now looking up the footpath. Obviously, we've got the construction works on the left-hand side. And the existing solar farm, which was visible on the aerial photo, sits behind the hedgerow on the right-hand side. As we walk up the footpath, we've got glimpses of the solar farm to the right. There are also rows of panels that you can see through the gaps in the hedgerow. You'll note the panels are a lot higher than what we're going to be discussing this afternoon. We are now approaching the site of the panels, which will be set on approximately 7 metres in from the post and rail fence that you can see on that photograph. Members should note the hedgerow in the background of the photo, which forms the eastern boundary of the site, which is the old railway line. Looking down the footpath back to Main Road, solar panels will be on the right-hand side, and the hedgerow on the left forms the boundary with the solar farm. A similar photo, which shows the start of the mature hedgerow to the multi-user area to the right, and then the final photo shows along the, and again, thank you, Phil. That's along the multi-user. Again, the hedgerow on the left-hand side forms the boundary to the application site. So moving on to the submitted plans. We've got the site layout, which shows the location of the solar array in the top right-hand corner in relation to the crematorium building, the car park and the landscape. Landscaping is proposed to the boundary with the footpath and between the proposed arrays and the car park. This drawing shows the sections through the site to illustrate the relationship of the footpath and the siting of the panels. It is quite faint. Can we zoom in just slightly on the top right? Okay, so on the far right of the sections, you've got a person in outline. Then you've got the post and rail fence. We've got landscaping between the panels, so you can just about see the 4 rows of panels. It is slightly elevated above the footpath, but landscaping is proposed, and once mature, it will actually be screened from the footpath. The final drawing shows the 4 rows of panels. You can see they are very low in height, not exceeding 40 centimetres above the ground level. So they're designed to minimise the visual impact in the area. So the report before the committee sets out the supporting document, justifying the proposal and the material planning considerations to be assessed. No objections to proposal have been received, and the application is only before the committee as the council is the applicant. The committee should note that the site is in the Greenbelt and the proposal is not within the identified list of not inappropriate development with the NPPF. It must therefore be considered as an inappropriate development, which, as members will be aware, is by definition harmful to the Greenbelt. The committee report at paragraph 26 identifies that the NPPF makes specific reference to renewable development in the Greenbelt and advises that developers will need to demonstrate very special circumstances. It is also acknowledged that such very special circumstances may include the wider environmental benefits associated with increased production of energy from renewable sources. It is therefore necessary to consider whether very special circumstances exist on the application to justify the grant of planning permission. The report sets out the supporting information which has been submitted and also considers the visual impact of the scheme. The committee can hopefully see from the photos taken around the site that the proposed development will predominantly be seen from users of the public footpath to the south and from within the site. Additional landscaping is proposed to screen the site, and the panels are low to the ground. It does need to be acknowledged that there is a degree of harm to openness in this location by, in effect, the presence of the development, but that this is proposed to be mitigated against by the planting and the siting of the development in the corner of the site. Taking into account the information submitted, the proposal is considered to represent a relatively small renewable energy development, which would serve to provide electricity for the base load of the building on the site. With local and national planning policies supporting the production of energy from renewable sources, in this case, it is considered that the proposal would result in a valuable environmental benefit, assisting to support the applicant's commitment to carbon management and sustainable development. So, Chair, so for the reasons are set out in the report, your officers are of the opinion the proposal would not result in a significant interruption in the openness of the Greenbelt in this location. On balance, the wider environmental benefits associated with the increased production of energy from renewable sources to serve this development set out in the report above clearly outweigh the totality of harm by reason of the inappropriateness and other harm, and the very special circumstances necessary to grant planning permission exist, and a favourable recommendation to committee, subject to the conditions set out in the report, is therefore forthcoming. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We do not have any speakers on this one, so I'll go straight to committee. Councillor Thomas, you have indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think it's deeply regrettable that the panels are going on the ground and not on the roof, or even a more imaginative solution like having panels over the car parking spaces. I think solar panels should be on roofs and the council should be setting an example. The building could have been designed to have them on the roof. Having said that, and I wish to register that point, I don't think this is a material consideration in determining this application. I think the other thing that is of a consideration in terms of solar panels is how the ground underneath them is managed. And I think I would like to see a condition about the management of the ground and around these solar panels to give us an example really as to how that can be done best for biodiversity. It may be in the landscaping plan already, but I would like to see specifically how they're managed, because there are examples of solar panels being managed with pesticides underneath them to cut down the grass growth and so on. And I would like to see a condition to really, for us really to be an exemplar in managing this, albeit small, area of solar panels. And I'd also like to see a condition about the security for these solar panels. There's quite a lot of theft and vandalism, and the metals in these things are becoming more and more desirable, and there's a lot more instances of theft, rural crime, and so on. And I would hate to see the whole site being subject to that sort of activity because of the solar panels. And so I would like to see a condition to provide a security plan, particularly for the solar panels. But with those two conditions, I would like to move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Towers. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Bailey, do you wish to speak?
Is there any battery storage? Because obviously this is being providing the base load for the building on the site, but perhaps at weekends when cremations are not taking place, possibly. Is there any battery storage of electricity if it's not being used sort of as the base load for the building? Thank you.
I can't answer that question in totality. The electricity supply will lead into the substation, which will obviously serve the base load of the building. The building will be in use. I don't know whether or not it has been designed to have a battery storage now. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
It would seem more eco-friendly if there was battery storage provision. I know more and more people, when they are putting in these kinds of panels, are actually thinking, well, if they can't use the energy there and then, they can at least store it. And I'm thinking perhaps on a bright sunny day, on a Sunday, let's imagine, during the summer, cremations aren't taking place, I would imagine. It's a shame if this can't be stored for use at a later time. It's something perhaps we ought to be thinking about in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Yeah, I don't know whether the answer to that question is that if the power isn't being used for the site, presumably it's being fed back into the grid. So in effect, you are then, I assume, producing some form of income, but the power won't be wasted. It'll be fed into the grid and therefore use made of it, I'm assuming. Yes. I have got other things. I don't know if you want to ask the officer to just confirm that before I say what I wanted to say.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is apparent now that any extra energy that's generated will be going into the grid, so it won't be lost.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want a couple of points, Madam Chairman. I agree with what Councillor Thomas said. It is a shame that there hasn't been an opportunity to put the panels either on the roof or indeed car parking places, as we seem to be getting more sunshine. On the continent, we get lots of covered parking areas with solar panels on. It's only a curiosity question, but why is this being brought now? Why wasn't it included in the original application rather than being brought as a separate one? But the question I just wanted to ask was about the screening. And you talked about the panels being screened, which is fine, but presumably it would be relatively low level screening, because you wouldn't want tall trees, which would then obliterate the sun from shining on the panels. So I'm assuming it is would be hedging or something similar that would remain at low level.
you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, careful consideration has been given to that. You can see from the site section below, the panels are actually set in approximately 7 metres from the side boundary. The hedgerow, once mature, is shown on the right-hand side, and clearly that will be managed to ensure that there is no overshadowing of the solar panels. And our landscape officer has confirmed that to be the case. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Ashcroft.
Chairman, if I can just try and set the broader picture here. Plainly, we're in a slightly unusual place. We're plainly here as the planning committee members. You are the regulator dealing with an application that's come from the council as effectively the landowner as the executive body. So it may well be that some of these issues that you're probing on about sort of maintenance and what happens to the battery and the electricity are very much issues that we could potentially more comfortably handle as notes to the applicant. In other words, note back to the executive body. And I think here we're in a fortunate place that the council, I'm sure, does want to lead by example and will potentially pave the way in terms of how these maintenance and land ownership issues are actually handled. In terms of the issue that Councillor Thomas raises about it being slightly unfortunate that effectively the solar panels cannot be on the roof. My understanding is that the council did consider that, but the roof space is insufficiently large to be able to cope with the power that's generated. The understanding is that it's only about 10% of electricity generated. That's why the application has come forward in this way. So again, it goes back to basics. We treat the application on its merits, treat the application on the basis that this is effectively a responsible applicant coming forward, trying to secure best practice. And therefore, I would suggest that these other issues that you've raised are comfortably handled as notes to applicant, because in some ways, they get under the skin of the statutory planning process. They're about management and maintenance rather than about land use. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, Councillor Thomas, are you satisfied with that explanation? It being not conditional?
Well, you know, I've set aside the issue of whether or not the building could have been designed to put the panels on the roof, but I would prefer to see conditions rather than advisory notes for the environmental management, which I think would be something that we would be prepared to put on anybody else's application, and also for the security in the interest of the public, really. Thank you.
In terms of the landscaping management aspect of the scheme, we do have an overriding management plan that has taken into account the potential for photovoltaic arrays in this location. So the management plan can cover obviously the management of the area of grass underneath that. I accept that potentially there may be more scope for more biodiverse variety in the grass underneath that, and I'm happy to explore that with the landscape officer as part of a potential amendment to the management plan.
Councillor Clark, you wish to come back?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. I just realised I think we ought to just very quickly address the or record comment relation to the green belt, because I think in this case, as indicated in the bullet points at the bottom of page 68, I think there are special circumstances that will bring wider environmental benefits associated with production of energy from renewable sources, which I think will outweigh the detriment, any detriment to the green belt. So I think perhaps it'd be useful for the records just that we have acknowledged within the committee that aspect of it.
Yes, sorry, I can see nodding heads, so I think people are in accord with that. I've actually no further speakers. It's been moved and seconded. Excuse me.
Can we just clarify whether they're conditioned or in the management plan and notes to that? Shall I do it?
Clarification is sought whether it's conditions or
Yeah, if I can just clarify before we move to the vote. So Councillor Thomas had said she'd prefer the conditions for the environmental management plan in relation to these specifically. Mrs Dunn then came back and said about the wider management plan. So just a decision from Councillor Thomas and Councillor Bailey as seconder on where that sits, whether you wanted two conditions for those that you'd outlined, informatives, or within the wider management plan that already exists.
I would like two conditions, please. One, that the environment plan is specifically signed off by officers to include management of the solar panel area, and the other that the security plan is produced particularly for the area around the solar panels to give that consideration, and that is signed off by the officers. Thank you.
That's fine, thank you. Councillor Bailey, is that acceptable? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the vote now then. This has been proposed and seconded. All those in favour of the motion?
6 unanimous.
Yes. Thank you. Before I send you home, there is one appeal decision which was dismissed. The appeal was dismissed, if you see on the back page. I'm quite pleased about that one. I think it was one that the committee actually voted against. So it was, wasn't it? Yes, thank you. Anyway, thank you for your attendance this afternoon, and wish you all a good journey home. Thank you.